This is Robert with Pioneer Smokehouses, and today on our Oklahoma Joe's Tahoma, I'm going to do a brisket. Now, this brisket is going to be a hot and fast, so we're not talking about a low and slow method, which is what I would traditionally do, but you can't really get a low and slow done in the amount of time that I have to film during daylight. So either I start the night before or I cook it hot and fast. Now, I've done hot and fast before and it usually turns out just fine. You do have to watch it a little bit closer, but the nice thing is that it cooks very quickly. Now, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get this thing started. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour in about 40 charcoal briquettes. And feel free to pour in a few extra, but don't pour in under because the charcoal briquettes light consistently and easy. So you want those in there first to get the smoker lit. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use some lump charcoal. Now this is just a part of a bag, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour the whole thing in. I do have another bag offset, and I will adjust and add what I need. So I poured in about 2/3 of that. Now I'm going to add some wood chunks. These are Western mesquite wood chunks, and you see they're a pretty good size here. And I'm going to go ahead and put those in here, and I'm just going to kind of bury one down in here first. And then I'll take another large one and put it on the opposite, just setting it on the top. Then I'll pour more of the lump charcoal in there. Try to keep from pouring any more of the dust in there. And now I'll put one here and one here. And I know that you can't really see that, so I'll try to grab a picture and put it up there. But I got one on each side for you. So then as it burns through, they don't kind of clump together. Now, if you look at that picture, you'll see that the one wood block that's closest to the smoker body is at the max line. So there's room to fill a little bit more in here. I'm gonna let it run for about an hour before I add to it, but by then we'll get a better idea of the charcoal consumption because we don't want to add any extra. It just doesn't seem like we can put this smoker out. Once we get it going, we need to use whatever we put in it. Plus, here on the creek, I always do that with any of my gravity feed smokers or even pellet smokers because I don't want anything left in there that can get humidity in it, which will cause a problem during the next smoke. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just push the on button. Then I'm going to go ahead and open the tray. Put in 2 of the fire starters. Now I've been lighting this on all sides to get it kind of going a little bit faster, but my last test cook that I didn't video, I actually just lit one little corner. And I think that that performed a little bit better because it started just a little slower. So I'm not gonna light it all over. I'm just gonna click it on the corner here. Let it get started, and then close the drawer. Make sure that you've checked to make sure that your damper is open. Again, I have not mastered using this damper, so at this point, I'm leaving it open most of the time. Now I open this up. And let's see a little bit of airflow. You can see a little bit of smoke in here. Now I'm going to go ahead and set my temperature. Today's cook will be at 350 degrees. You can see that we're getting good smoke coming through now, so it's starting to light. The primary fan stays on a very low speed for the first 2 minutes, and then once it starts getting a chance to light that charcoal, then it'll ramp up. I think the reason that it does this is so it doesn't blow out your fire starters. It'll take a few minutes for this to get going. I have a close-up cam on the control panel, but it is very glary, so it's hard to get a good view. I hope that you can see a little bit of what's going on. I have it set at 350. It's currently showing a 50-degree temperature. Outside is 46 degrees. I have the probe just sitting over there, so that way, until I'm ready to use it, I get a good idea of the outside temperature. And the fan has ramped up, and I can actually feel heat coming off of the side of the smoker. So that means that we have ignited, and you can see that the smoke has thinned out a little bit. So since that's the case, I'm going to go ahead and close the door. Something else to note is that I have been leaving this open to the maximum amount. So I opened it all the way and then gave it a half turn. I don't know if that matters, but I believe that the more airflow you have, the better your smoke will taste. Now, if you're having a hard time with your temperature, then you might want to close that down just a little bit, because it will slow up the airflow just a little bit, which will allow the smoker to heat a little bit better. We have a nice day out here today. Again, 46 degrees outdoor temperature. I'm gonna grab the brisket and we'll go through that real quick. I'll be right back. I've got the brisket here, and the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and put a tray in here. Now, you all know the reason I'm doing that is to catch a dripping so we can keep the smoker as clean as possible. But also, we're gonna put the tallow in there. That way we can get that a little bit smoky also. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a measuring cup, and this one is a 2 cup, and I'm gonna put 1 cup of my favorite barbecue sauce on here. I wanna note that I'm wearing my gloves, and when I'm done, I'm gonna wash all the containers. So I'm gonna put just under a cup of this in there. All right, that's about 3/4. That'll do. Maybe a little more than 3/4, which is about what I'm going for. You can use a lot of different sauces. You don't have to use my favorite brand. You can use your favorite brand or whatever you like. You can even make your own barbecue sauce if you want. Now, this is a 50% reduced sodium beef broth. And I'm going to fill this up to the 2 cup line. And that's it. Now I'll go ahead and give that a stir. Today's primary seasoning is going to be Cosmos cow cover dry rub, and also their double pepper cow cover. I like to use these together. This one seems to get a better cover, but this one gives it that nice bark. They have similar flavors, but that one has more pepper, of course, and it's coarse pepper. I'm going to use just a little bit of this. That looks like about 3 tablespoons. I'll go ahead and stir this marinade up and then set it aside, so that way the seasonings that we do use here have a chance to hydrate. I want them to soak up as much liquid and become wet. Set that to the side for now. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small bowl for the trimmings, and we are going to trim the heck out of this. We're going to scalp it down pretty good. I don't like any of the fat on here when I'm doing the hot and fast method. When I'm doing it low and slow, I like to trim it to just around 1/4 inch or a little less. And this one is what they would consider partially trimmed. So the store has done a light trim on it before I purchased it. I like to purchase briskets right around the 13-pound range, maybe even 12.5 pounds, and I want to end up with a brisket at 12 pounds after trimming. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work on that. I have a curved boning knife, and this is what I find works the best for me to get the trim that I want. And again, I'm going to trim this more than I would with a low and slow. So I've trimmed it to about where I want it. I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff here. There might be just a little bit of edges here that I could take off. I don't plan on saving any of the scraps today. Normally I would trim it a little bit more symmetrical and save scraps for something like stew or chili. Also, this is great stuff for people who make their own sausage. Now, some of you brisket purists are going to be like, oh my gosh, you over trimmed it. And I trimmed it a lot. I wanted to get rid of a lot of stuff and try to get it down to where we could break down what's here and not have a lot of fat on there. This is just the way I do it for hot and fast. So don't crucify me in the comments, but if you have a better idea for hot and fast, feel free to comment. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the one side here, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to lay out some injection. I like to go about 1 inch in between each hole and a little bit more on the point side. It's been my experience that if I don't inject on hot and fast, it does tend to dry out. When you're injecting and you get to a thinner spot, take your needle at a little bit of an angle, and that'll help you get it in there. The actual spot where the injection comes out is on the side of the needle. Now I've injected this side. You can see that there's a lot of the injection on the surface. That's because as I go, it tends to pop out in different places. The meat fibers running across, when I put the injection in here, it could run down the fiber and pop out in another location, with or without holes. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spread this around a little bit like a binder. I don't want it too thick, but I want it spread around. Again, remember, I'm going to wash all these containers when I'm done. So if you're not going to do that, you can set them in a glove. It's a good option. Now I'm going to put a light coat of coarse ground black pepper on there. And that excess marinade injection makes that bind really good. Next, I'm going to go with the original cow cover. It is a finer product, and so it's very well granulated. Then I'm going to take a little layer of the coarse cow cover. After I do that, I'm going to pat that in. I don't want to push it so hard that the injection comes out, but I want to make sure that it's tacked on. And then I'm going to check the point to make sure I have enough seasoning, and I think I need a little bit more. I'm going to go just a little more pepper on here, and a little more of the original cow cover. Now you're going to notice that I didn't use any salt, and that's because there's salt in these products here. Now I'm going to go ahead and gently flip it over. I'm going to try to pick up a little bit of the seasoning on that corner there. The goal is to get a little bit of that seasoning from there. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to inject this side. So I'll be right back. Now I've gotten through this section here, the lower part, the flat, and right here you can see the dividing line between the flat and the point. I didn't overdo this section because it's so thin. I did the other side pretty aggressively, but on the point I want to do the exact opposite. Now, as you're going and you get near the halfway mark on your marinade, if it looks like it's thickening up a little bit, because it will settle, add a little bit more of that beef broth to thin it out. We're really close here though, so I don't think that I'm going to worry too much about that. I think we got enough marinade in there to move forward. Now the next thing that I'm going to do As you know me, I got to put a grill mat in the smoker. Gonna leave it hanging off just a little bit, so when I load the brisket, I can give it a push backwards. Now I'm gonna go ahead and rub that marinade that's on the surface around. And again, that'll just create a nice binder effect. And then we'll do the same thing again, starting with the pepper. I'm gonna coat it, and this time I'm gonna check the edges. I feel like there's really no way to do this without getting seasoning pretty much everywhere. So that's how it rolls. Now you still want to handle it pretty gently because it is puffed up full of the injection. I'm going to go ahead and open this. Now for me, it's really important that I have the smoker well preheated. It's been ready to cook on for 20 minutes, but I want the whole smoker body to be preheated so that way we don't have any problems with dropping in temperature when we leave the lid open like this. The whole body conducts the heat, and as soon as we close it, it'll come back up. On some of my cheaper smokers, I like to throw in fire bricks or something to improve the thermal performance. I'm going to try to get it as close to the middle as possible. And then what I want to do is I want to make sure it's not touching the back or any of the sides. You'll see that I put the point to this side because it will hold the heat a little bit better. It will be a little bit more heat resistant. If it goes above temperature, it will still be really good to eat. Let's get this closed. We're gonna let that go for about an hour, and then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get some ideas. I'm gonna get the instant read thermometer out and see what's going on. Again, we've got 350 degrees. We don't have any probes in it yet. I tend to like to flip my briskets. Another thing that you brisket purists are not gonna like too much, but sometimes you get that little pocket right on the top middle where the flat and the point meet. And I like to eliminate that. And especially since I'm collecting the juices, then we can reuse that juice just by dumping it into that pan. So we're gonna go ahead and take a break and go from there. So it's been about an hour and a half, and I'm ready to go ahead and put in some thermometers. Now, if you're gonna have a really long cook, sometimes I like to just leave the thermometers out because we really don't need to know until we're really close to the end. And the thermometers, especially the wired ones, just get in the way when you're trying to move your food around. So in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and move forward with the thermometers, but again, I would try to avoid that. First thing I did on the temp spike is I turned the app on. Then I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out. It should automatically initialize, and we're showing here, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, 72 degrees, target temperature, we'll change that, and the ambient temperature is 72 degrees. So both ends of the probe are at 72, which is what the temperature in my house is, and it's dropping. I'm gonna go ahead and open this. I'm going to put my thumb right there on the black line. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a little line. That line has to go into the meat for this to work correctly. Go straight in just like that. And just past that black line. Looks good. This is nowhere near the edge, and I want it to be a little ways away from the meat so it doesn't get the temperature confused. I just want that ambient temperature. Here, we have one of the probes from the Oklahoma Joe's Tahoma, and I'm going to slide that through. And then I'm going to put that on this end. Now I took it at a little bit of an angle, then I tried to flatten it out a little bit so it'll go through there. And there we are, just like that. Now, I don't know if you can get a look at that, but that fat is rendering out and we're getting some oil down there. If I don't like what I see in about an hour, I'll transfer that fat into a pan and simmer it down. But it looks like it's moving along pretty good. Let's get this closed. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this. So now currently it's giving me an internal temperature of 102. So we are moving along really quick, which is the benefit of being at 350 degrees. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change what we're cooking. Now this was set for poultry, but what we're going to do is we're going to see down here I added brisket. Hit OK. Tells us how to put it in, da-da-da. And now it's changed the target temperature to 195. See if I can lower this down just a little bit so you might be able to see that in the close-up cam. So we've got an ambient temperature, and the ambient temperature is still climbing, so this is not anywhere near right. You can see it's just going right up. It's 154 now, 158, boom. Internal temperature now is 104. It's calculating how long it's going to take to cook it. But until that thermometer gets completely balanced out in temperature, we won't really know how long it's going to take to cook it because it can't do the math accurately yet. So we'll let this go for about 10 minutes and then it'll give us a real good estimate of where we're at. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave this right here so it's close to the temp spike and it's not too close to get hot. I'll set this out of camera for a second. And now here, that flat is at 133. Now I didn't get it in too deep, so maybe I should push it in there a little bit deeper to get a better idea. But we have some kind of information coming back now. So we're just going to leave it as is and go from there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the charcoal supply here really quick. And I'm going to go really fast here. I don't want to keep it open. All right, so it has dropped down and we need to advance that. I'm going to grab the camera and take a little picture of that. So I have this metal pipe here that I've been using and I'm just going to take it and I'm going to push that down. After I leveled the smoker, the briquettes went down a lot easier, but the lump charcoal still tends to get caught. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of the briquettes to that, and then I'll add a little lump on top of that. When I pushed that down, a lot of smoke did come out of this chamber. I think that's because I introduced a lot of oxygen. But in here, you'll see that there's hardly any smoke in there, so we're still good inside the cooking chamber. I don't mind a little bit of that smoke. I think that that adds a lot of taste to it, as long as the smoke is not billowing white. So I'll go ahead and get some more lump charcoal and add that on top of those briquettes that I just added. Keep in mind, the smoker's only been running for 2 hours, and we've used about 4 pounds of briquettes and about 5 pounds of lump charcoal, and it was still burning solidly, of course, so it wasn't out, but the chute or hopper was pretty much hung up and empty. So I'm going to add a little bit more of that after I turn the camera off. But we are going to go along and just keep cooking for a couple of hours and not worry about anything. So I'll see you in a second. So it's been slightly over 2 hours now and we've been moving along pretty good. I did have a little bit of a temperature spike when I went to reload that. So I went ahead and I lowered the controls down to 335, which slowed the temperature climb down. Now, it's currently saying that the temperature is 379. I was thinking about this a little bit, and of course the temperature is going to be higher up here than it is down at the surface level. You might need to account for that by lowering the temperature slightly here to make up for the temperature at a higher level. which is probably a good thing because then you'll use less fuel. Now, right now on the temp spike, I'm going to see if I can get a close-up of this. We're getting 162 degrees internal, and on the Oklahoma Joe's Tahoma, we're getting 161. So the two temperature probes have balanced out a little bit. It is showing 383 at the level where that temp spike is, and I'm just going to say that that's a little high, but it seems to be cooking good. The only concern that I have is that crust is starting to dry a bit. So we're going to take some of that oil or beef tallow and put it on there. Now, I added another tray because that tray looked like it was getting a little full. So maybe that those little trays aren't the best thing to use in here. They did fit pretty well, and I added the second one across here sideways, transferred all of the fat that still needed to render out. So there's a lot of pieces of meat in there, and I'll tell you, I've snacked on a couple of them, and they're tasty. They're not exactly the tenderest pieces of meat though. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do just like I would do with the turkey, is I'm just going to cover this across the top. But I gotta tell you, I brought the brush out here, but it looks like the turkey baster is doing the job. I just have a little bit on the top here to get to. I'm gonna try pulling this out. So I want you to note here that the brisket is not over the grill mat anymore, and I'm going to go ahead and close that. So it looks like that when the brisket tightened up that it moved more on the point end than it did on the flat end. We might want to position it further across when we use the grill mat next time. Now we'll see how it goes, but it looks pretty good right now, and we're just doing that to try to reduce the mess as much as possible. I'm going to go ahead and consider whether or not I'm going to flip that in about an hour. And if I do, then I will see you. That'll just be 1 second for you though. It's been about another hour, and I've been checking on it just a little bit more than before because it's going up in temperature pretty fast. I have my temperature alarm set at 195, and currently the temp spike is showing that it's 194. Now I believe that we're going to find that that's a little off. I feel like that maybe we're into some fat that's rising in temperature a little faster than the meat. The probe over here is showing 167 on the Oklahoma Joe's Tahoma built-in probe. Let's go ahead and open this up real quick and take a look. Now I did put a little bit more of the tallow on there because I just liked how it looked when I did that. And you'll see that we're building a really nice crust here. And of course, like I said, that's the tallow from the drippings here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this one on. I don't have my lightning right now. I loaned it out and I have not gotten it back yet. And if you look here, you can see that when this pulled back, that the thermometer is actually receding. I have not seen that before, but I think that's because it was pulled back so much on the point that the thermometer came out a little bit. So I pushed that back in. So I'm gonna say that we're probably gonna have a little bit more accurate temperature reading here in a minute. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and put this in here. And we're getting 153 right there. And here, 145. 160. 158. 154. We learned something today about putting the temp spike in the point when the brisket tightens up and that recedes, then the temp spike will actually come out. So that's going to make a big difference on our temperature. Let's go ahead and check the app and see if it's updated. Now, I don't know if you can see that with the camera or not, but it says that it is now at 172. But just a few minutes ago, it said 174. So I was really concerned that it was cooking a lot faster than I wanted. But I think what was happening is the longer it was cooking, the farther it was pulling out of there. Now, I did lower that temperature down to 335. We don't have a new calculated cooking time, but we will in a moment. Now, the temp spike, I touched it with a cold device, so it dropped down in temperature a little bit. It's showing the internal temperature at 343 right now, and it is climbing, so I'm sure that it will come back up into the 375 range or somewhere around there. It is still climbing while we're talking. Now, once it gets to a stable temperature, it will calculate the new cooking time. I'm still going to keep an eye on this, and I'm still expecting another 2 hours. When you cook on the hot and fast method, it usually pushes right through the stall, and it looks like that's what it's done. The stall was a very small amount of time because the temperature is so hot that it just works through all that steam. So we're going to go ahead and keep a good eye on this, and the fan just kicked on again. You can see a little bit of smoke coming out. Then I will also add some more charcoal. I'm probably going to switch over to briquettes. I've been adding lump and wood chunks, but I think for the rest of the cook, I'm going to switch back to briquettes because it'll be easier and they'll self-feed. I won't have to maintain the hopper at all, and it'll just slide down. As long as you keep the smoker level, which I placed it on a piece of metal to keep those wheels from digging into the gravel, it feeds pretty well. But the lump charcoal doesn't feed so well, especially with the irregular larger shapes. So let's go ahead and take another break. For me, I'm saying that's probably going to be at least an hour, but maybe 2. And I'm sure that I'm going to be wrapping this because that crust is starting to get a little bit darker than I like around the edges. And I'll just be wrapping it in foil, and I'll be using some of that tallow to keep it lubed up a little bit, shall we say. So we'll be right back in 1 second. So we have reached the temperature that I was going for, which is 196. I moved the target temperature up a little bit so that way this thing wouldn't keep beeping at me. Now, that doesn't mean that we're done. That means that we're ready to check it. Now, at 196, depends on the brisket, but on low and slow, you're going to be really close to done after a 1 hour rest. If you want a little bit faster, you're going to need to bring it up a little bit higher. So if you want a 30-minute rest, you're going to need to bring it up higher. I don't like mushy meat. So let me repeat that. I like my meat a little bit on the firmer side. I don't want it chewy, but I do want it to be firm and to hold together. I don't want it to fall apart. So if you get too high in temperature, that is a possibility. I'm going to go ahead and turn the probe on. We'll open it up. And just for you, I'm going to pop this picture I took right before I turned the camera on. Now the temperature is kind of low. I'm showing 162 here, but well, that's still pretty firm. Way too firm there. Way too firm. See, right here, I'm getting a temperature of 181. So we're nowhere near being ready. So I went ahead and I moved the temp spike because I didn't think I was getting a good reading. I moved it into a harder part of the meat, and I think that answers the question. I think it was sitting in some fat and picking up too much temperature. Now I'm showing a more reasonable temperature of 178. But looking at the crust on the outside, I think it's time to go ahead and wrap it. We don't want it burned on the outside. I'm going to go ahead and pull out the grill mat because it's pretty dirty. Set it down here for now. Set that right there. And yeah, we have lost the temperature from that. Let's see if this is cool enough to grab. Yeah. By setting it to the outside, it cooled down rather fast. So now we put that in there, and the thermometer is in there, so we'll get a reading, but the temp spike is no longer working. The best thing to do with that is to remove the temp spike, wrap it up real tight, and then put the temp spike all the way through the foil. But I don't want an extra hole in the foil. The other spike is a little bit smaller, so that'll be fine. So we've got it set on 335, and I know that it's running pretty hot, so I'm just gonna leave it set there. It's been cooking in the 380 range. We're gonna go for another hour and keep a close eye on this. We want to see it get way up there in temperature. And we have here, we're reading 167. I don't think that it's leveled out yet though, because it looks like it's still climbing up. So I expect to see this come up to about 171 or 172, which is where we were before, which will give us a couple more hours cook time. So for you, that'll just be 1 second. We are back and the brisket has made it to temperature. I went ahead and I used my instant read thermometer to double check the temperature, but also to feel the texture of the brisket. Now, the point actually turned out a little bit softer than the flat, but I'm hoping that a nice long rest inside a towel in a cooler is going to work out really well. Behind me on the ground, I have a generic cooler. Over here, I have my towel. I set it on my cookie sheet just because it'll make it easier to deal with. I take the towel and fold over just a little bit of it over the edge, and I'll set it right here. Grab this. First thing I have to do is get the thermal probe out of there because this one here is going to be too hot to touch. Then I'm going to just take this brisket as quickly as possible and I'm going to slide it out onto the cookie sheet. I was hoping that it didn't stick and rip the foil, but it feels like it did. That's okay. The towel can be washed. So the reason I folded it under was so that way I'll be able to fold that just like that on the top. Now I can go like this and then fold the ends over. Then we'll take this cooler here and we'll just set this right on in there. I'll go ahead and close this for now. What I'll do is, while it's still warm, I'm going to go ahead and brush it down a little bit and make sure that it's able to heat up a little bit. The charcoal, when I went to reload it last time, I think I might have dumped it a little hard, so it might have put half of it out. And so it's been having a little bit of a hard time staying up with temperature. But the brisket made it there, and that's all that matters. I'm going to set a timer for 1 hour, and that'll just be 1 second for you. It has been an hour, and no matter whether it's ready or not, we're cutting it because we're just about out of daylight here. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put my gloves on. Let's grab it out. Didn't leak too bad, just a couple little drips, no biggie. Whew. Ripped it open there though. All right, let's just go ahead and get this out of there. And I'll tell you, this thing is full of juice. Go ahead and pick that up. Comes out real easy, that's a good sign. Now you can see the line here where the point comes away. And typically what I like to do is I like to break that just a little bit. So that separates that out. Now if I was going for additional cooking, I would make burnt ends out of this. I would just chop it up and then I would take it and cube it and put it in a tray and cover it with some really nice barbecue sauce. I'm going to go ahead and cut right here. It's a little firm. Boy, but it is really juicy. So I'm going to show you that. See it there. Then we're going to give it a little pull and see if it comes apart. Oh, and it did. That's pretty good. It might be able to rest a little bit longer, but it's looking pretty good. Still a little bit of fat on there. I didn't overdo it completely, but again, not a lot of fat. Now I'm going to go ahead and get a bite. I definitely want you to see that. It is not dry at all. Because we have it wrapped for so long, the bark is a little moist. If you're okay with that, leave it like that. If not, you could take this and throw it underneath your broiler for a couple minutes, and that'll fix that up really good. Now before the camera runs out of battery power, I'm going to take a cut right here. Notice that I spun the point in the opposite direction so I could get a cut across it. And this is where you're going to see the real soft meat here. The point always comes out softer. I'm just going to show you that. Now it is hotter also. That's really good. Go right. There's a lot of fat in this piece. It's going to show you how much that just falls apart like that. Okay, so this pretty much covers this, and we will call this a success. I did have a little bit of temperature fall off at the end, but I let the charcoal run down too low, and so that was kind of my fault for not staying on top of it. One of my issues with it, I think, is that you really need to stay on top of that bin, so you really can't walk away and let it run. It's consuming a little bit more charcoal than what I expected, but that'll be, you know, just something to keep an eye on. And it cleaned up really nice. I was able to scrub it up, and then I put it on and let it run, and it came out really good. The Oklahoma Joe Tahoma smoker at the time of filming was only available at Lowe's, so I'll include that link down below, and when it becomes available at other places, I'll update that. If you saw anything you like in the video, like this knife or the temp spike probe, there's affiliate links below. Those won't cost you anything, but they'll help the channel out. And you can also buy this directly from the manufacturer, which I actually recommend because they have been nothing but great. When I had an issue, they took care of it. Within 3 days, I had a new temp spike. So Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.